So, you've returned to the archives yet again, traveller. Welcome. Before we wander too far, let me ask you something very important. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments where you are in this great big world so that I can say hello and thank you for being here in the archives for more boring, sleep-inducing history. This time you walk into ancient Rome, though not the marble and statue version that shows up on postcards and coinage. You walk into the back streets where real people lived and worked, where taverns stayed open long after the sun decided it had done enough. Inside those walls, ordinary workers carried out quiet routines that kept customers fed, calmed, and occasionally rescued from their own questionable choices. There is nothing glamorous about this work, and that is exactly why it belongs here in the archives. Amongst the features here are slow moments created by steady hands that serve warm stew in clay cups that can be quite brittle, as well as lamps that need constant trimming, and you will drift through it observing the rhythms of a place where history wore simple clothes and did not bother with speeches. If you enjoy these slow explorations of everyday life, you can like the video, subscribe to the channel and tap the bell so that the archives stay easy to find whenever you need something calm and comforting to fall asleep to. Now, settle in. Let your mind wander through a Roman tavern at the edge of evening. The work is quiet, the pace is slow, and the story unfolds one gentle step at a time. You walk through a Roman alley at dawn, long before the tavern workers expect you. The city still sits in a quiet half-sleep, even though it pretends it never sleeps at all. The sky shows that pale, early color that looks like someone spilled watered wine across the horizon. You feel the cool air against your face, heavy with the smell of last night's charcoal and the faint sourness of spilled wine that no one bothered to scrub properly. It is a familiar scent in these back streets. This scent is not unpleasant, nor is it delightful, but simply the cost of a city that squeezes too many lives into too little space. The tavern sits tucked into a row of shops that close up like clamshells at night. You notice the wooden sign that hangs slightly crooked, the chains rusted from years of weather. It swings lazily when a breeze passes, even though the breeze barely counts as movement. Inside, you hear someone stirring, a common occurrence in the tavern at this time of day. No one ever asks if the workers want to start before sunrise. They simply do it. This is the kind of job that rewards habit more than ambition. One of the workers steps out with a broom made of stiff twigs tied together. They sweep the front stones with slow strokes. You watch the dust rise a little, then settle right back down, as if deciding it prefers the ground. It is the sort of chore that never ends. You see the worker accept this truth with the sort of patience that only develops after years of the same motions. You learn quickly that Roman tavern life does not revolve around dramatic moments. It revolves around small motions, repeated so often they become quiet rituals. Inside, the hearth at the back still holds yesterday's embers. Another worker crouches near it, coaxing them back to life. They blow gently, then add thin sticks to help the fire remember that it is supposed to provide warmth. You hear the faint crackle as the wood decides to cooperate. You smell the first hints of smoke that will cling to every wall and garment by the end of the day. You get used to that smell and you stop noticing it after a while. The workers stopped noticing years ago. A third worker checks the amphorae lined against the wall. Tall clay vessels with narrow necks, sealed with cork and wax. Some contain wine that has been watered down already. Some hold wine that will be watered down later. Romans rarely drink wine in the pure form. That is considered a questionable habit, the kind that sends a certain message about your restraint or the lack of it. The worker tilts one amphora slightly, feeling its weight to see if it will provide enough libation for the morning crowd. They nod to themselves in a way that says they were worried for a moment, even though they knew it would probably be fine. Bread delivery comes next. A boy arrives with a basket balanced on one hip. He looks too young for the job, which is the Roman way of things. The workers take the loaves, pay the boy, and send him off unceremoniously. They tap the loaves lightly with their knuckles, the same way bakers do. This is not for show. It tells them if the bread dried out overnight or if it will still pass for fresh. Everything in the tavern passes through hands that know these textures. You continue to watch as one of the workers fills a bucket from the communal fountain outside. The water is cold, almost painfully so, and you see their shoulders tighten for a moment as they lift it. The Romans pride themselves on their aqueducts. Still, tavern water never feels as clean as what flows through the grand fountains in the upper districts. This is the sort of water that you boil, flavor, disguise, or at least pretend not to think about. Inside, tables are wiped down with a cloth that has lived a full life of its own. Old stains remain as a reminder that the tavern sees more action than many temples. Cups and bowls made of clay that chips too easily are inspected in the quiet morning light. Some pieces will survive the day. Some will meet the floor later when someone laughs too hard or gestures too wide. The workers know this. The owner knows this. Everyone accepts the cycle. The tavern workers themselves are an interesting mix. Some are related to the owner. Some owe debts they are slowly working off. Some simply needed a job and were willing to tolerate long days, loud patrons, and the never-ending requests for one more cup of anything. They move with the steadiness of people who have stopped expecting surprises. That does not make them dull. It makes them practical. A good tavern demands practical people. As you stand in the corner watching, the workers begin laying out olives, cheese, figs, and whatever stew survived from the night before. Romans believe strongly in leftovers. The workers stir the pot and judge whether it needs more herbs, more heat, or simply more confidence. They ladle a bit into a bowl, taste it, make a face that is not negative or positive, just factual, and adjust accordingly. Before the doors open, the workers check the lamps. Oil levels, wicks trimmed, soot wiped off. Lamps matter. Light controls the mood more than the customers ever realize. At night, the lamps soften the room and soften the tempers. During the day, they fight the gloom that creeps into narrow streets where sunlight rarely wins. Finally, the broom worker sweeps once more, as if hoping that a clean threshold will bring clean behavior from the customers. It will not. They know it will not. Still, they sweep. The workers then take a breath, the kind people take before a long day of predictable unpredictability. The tavern waits for its first customers. You stand there, sharing the quiet, realizing that the work begins long before anyone orders a cup of wine. And this is how the day starts for Roman tavern workers. Quiet, steady, already tired before the doors even open. When you look at the workers, you notice one who hesitates more than the others. Their hands move with that careful uncertainty that tells you they have only recently joined the crew. Every workplace has a rhythm, and this tavern has a rhythm that does not wait for newcomers to catch up. Still, the training is gentle in its own practical way. Just a slow passing of knowledge that happens while the work rolls on around them. A newcomer in a Roman tavern is not handed a list of rules. They simply follow an older worker until the motions begin to settle into their body. Pouring wine into clay cups looks simple until you try to keep your finger steady, while the amphora feels heavier than expected. Watering the wine to the correct ratio is its own science. Too weak and customers complain that the tavern cheats. Too strong and customers stay too long, lose too many coins, and create too many problems. The older workers show the balance with a patience that masks years of muscle memory. You watch the trainee practice. They tilt the amphora just a little too far, catch it, adjust, and look relieved. You can feel their heartbeat from across the room. Learning the skill takes time. The older workers pretend not to notice small mistakes. The tavern notices, but taverns notice everything. They simply choose what matters. Next comes cleaning the tables. The newcomer wipes in a full circle, then realizes the veteran workers wipe in long, straight lines. Circles leave crumbs trapped in the middle. Lines push everything off neatly. The trainee changes technique without a word spoken. Even silence has lessons in the tavern. The older worker leads them to the back room where supplies are stored. You follow along, curious to see how a Roman tavern teaches its people. Shelves hold clay cups stacked with the kind of optimism that ignores the risk of toppling. Jugs of oil, bundles of firewood, extra cloths, knives for cutting cheese and bread, and herbs tied in little bundles fill the corners. Everything has a place, although the system makes sense only to the workers. The trainee studies it like someone trying to read a map that was drawn by a person who trusted instinct more than straight lines. The next lesson involves coins. A tavern worker must learn quickly how to tell good coins from shaved ones. Some customers file down the edges to keep a little silver for themselves. It is a quiet kind of theft, more annoying than dangerous. The older worker shows the trainee how to feel the edges with their thumb. A smooth edge means trouble. A crisp edge means honesty. The trainee nods slowly while testing each coin. You watch as they repeat the motion again and again, the coins clicking softly in their hands. The rhythm comforts them, even though they do not say so. Another part of the job is reading customers before trouble starts. The older worker points out the tavern door, then explains the signals through simple gestures. A stagger suggests someone has been drinking elsewhere already. A lean forward suggests someone intends to negotiate the price of everything. A swagger suggests someone wants attention more than refreshments. The tavern workers treat these signals like weather signs, not warnings, just information you note as you keep working. The trainee is told to watch people's hands, not their faces. Hands tell more truth. Someone who grips their cup too tight might argue later. Someone who forgets where they put their hands might fall asleep at the table. Someone whose hands shake slightly might try to sneak away without paying. These small observations shape the success of a tavern shift. Food preparation also becomes part of training. The newcomer learns how to cut cheese into consistent slices. Inconsistent slices make customers suspicious that someone is trying to cheat them. A simple bowl of olives becomes an art form when you must arrange them so they look generous at first glance. The trainee tries several arrangements. The older worker adjusts them slightly. You watch the trainee nod, even though they do not entirely understand the difference. Next comes the stew. The trainee stands near the pot, stirring slowly. The older worker dips a spoon, tastes, then adds herbs and salt. Romans take stew seriously because stew solves a lot of problems. It hides imperfect meat. It stretches ingredients farther. It comforts tired people. The trainee keeps stirring until they find the natural pace, the one that keeps the stew from settling too deeply at the bottom. Training continues at the bar. The older worker shows how to stack cups so the top cup does not wobble. They explain how to discreetly sweep crumbs into a bucket without breaking the flow of service. They point out areas on the floor where customers often trip, which means spills often happen, which means towels must be kept close by. The trainee absorbs all this with a calm determination that reminds you of someone learning a craft rather than memorizing instructions. What surprises you most is the tone of the training. None of it feels rushed. None of it feels dramatic. It feels old, time-honored, as if this exact process has been repeated for generations and will continue long after this particular group of workers has moved on. The tavern has a way of shaping people without raising its voice. By the time you reach the end of the training round, the trainee looks less uncertain, still new, still cautious, but anchored now. They understand that the tavern does not demand brilliance. It demands steadiness. It demands attention to detail. It demands the kind of patience that comes from knowing every day looks similar and that this sameness is not a punishment. It is a sounded structure. You step aside as the trainee carries out their next task. You see their shoulders settle into a more confident posture. The tavern accepts them silently, the way it accepts all who are willing to learn the small, slow traditions that keep the place running. This is how a new hand becomes part of the quiet work of a Roman tavern. You walk into the tavern's back room as the morning shifts toward the hour when people expect food, even if they pretend they do not care about quality. The tavern workers know the truth. People may not demand the finest dining, but they want the basics handled with quiet competence. You watch them start the process that keeps the tavern fed through the day. It is not glamorous, but it has a pleasing rhythm to it, almost like watching someone sharpen tools before real work begins. The workers gather around the amphorae first. These tall clay vessels line the wall like silent guards. Every tavern relies on them for its identity. Wine mixed at the correct strength decides whether customers stay content or grow rowdy. Roman wine is rarely served at full power unless someone wants to make a statement. And taverns rarely want statements. They want steady, predictable behavior. So the workers check the water jugs, lift them with both hands, and pour measured amounts into each amphora. You see them tilt their heads the way bakers do when listening for the sound of mixed dough. It is the sound of liquid shifting inside the vessel, telling them whether the ratio feels right. Accuracy lives in the hands and ears more than the eyes. Next comes the honeyed wine mixture. Some customers want sweetness. Some claim it helps the stomach. Others simply like to feel as if life has given them a small treat before the rest of the day reminds them otherwise. The worker dips a ladle into a pot of warmed honey, watching it stretch and fall in a slow ribbon. They mix it with wine in a separate jug, stirring with a long wooden spoon until the scent changes from sharp to mellow. You smell the shift. It has a way of softening the air. Once the wine is handled, attention turns to the food. The stew from the previous evening sits in its clay pot. Roman taverns never let food go to waste, so the workers give it new life each morning. Someone lifts the pot to the hearth, letting it heat while they prepare herbs. You watch them crush dried oregano and savory leaves between their fingers. The aroma rises gently, never overwhelming. They sprinkle the herbs into the pot, stir, taste, and adjust with a calm neutrality. They do not react with delight or disappointment. Stew is not a moment of inspiration. It is a slow negotiation. Bread sits cooling on a table. The workers slice the round loaves with deliberate cuts. Each slice has a thickness that betrays years of habit. Too thick, and the customer grumbles about clumsy hands. Too thin, and they grumble about stinginess. The ideal slice lives in a narrow middle ground. The workers hit that mark without thinking. They arrange the slices in baskets lined with cloth. The trainee from earlier watches closely, memorizing the angle of each cut as if bread could somehow reveal a secret. Olives come next. Large bowls filled with greens and blacks are poured carefully onto a platter. Workers sort through them with efficient fingers, removing shriveled ones, bruised ones, and the occasional stubborn pit left behind. A neat platter of olives always gives the impression that the tavern cares about appearances, even though most customers never stop to appreciate the effort. You watch the workers move them around until the display looks inviting without looking staged. Cheese follows. Hard blocks of salty sheep cheese wait in a corner. A worker takes a knife and slices the block into neat triangles. Roman cheese has a pleasant firmness that cooperates most days. The knife glides through smoothly enough, although you notice tiny cracks that reveal its age. The workers do not mind. Cheese lasts a long time and age adds character. They arrange the slices on a wooden board with a handful of figs for colour. It looks simple, but thoughtful. The kind of thing travellers appreciate without commenting on. Once the ingredients are prepared, attention shifts to the cooking area. The hearth fire burns steadily now, casting an amber glow over the room. A worker adjusts the pot, moves the logs, nudges ash aside, and keeps the heat consistent. Temperature control in a tavern is not a matter of knobs and gauges. It is instinct born from too many early mornings and too many burned stews. The worker's face shows no frustration. This is routine. In another corner, someone washes clay cups in a shallow basin. The water is not warm, but it is clean enough for tavern standards. They scrub the cups with attention to the rims, checking for chips that could irritate a customer or, worse, draw blood. A chipped cup leads to complaints, and complaints lead to trouble. You see them set aside a handful of damaged cups. They will be patched later if possible. If not, they will become shards for floor repair or be tossed into the street to mix with all the other broken pottery in the city's endless supply of rubble. The workers clean the counter, rubbing oil into the wood to keep it from drying out. The grain darkens slightly, giving it a richer color. You run your hand along the surface and feel grooves worn by thousands of cups sliding back and forth. These grooves tell stories of past days, none of which anyone will ever bother to retell. When all preparation is done, the workers step back and look around the room. Everything sits in its proper place, waiting for customers who will arrive with all their quirks and expectations. You realize how much effort goes into the part of the day most customers never witness. People will walk in later, order wine, eat stew, and never think about the many hands that shaped their meal. Food and drink preparation in a Roman tavern is not glamorous, but it has its own quiet dignity. You sense that the workers understand this. They know their labor keeps the tavern comfortable and predictable, and that reliability matters in a city where chaos likes to lurk in the background. You watch them finish their tasks with a steady calm, ready to face the next part of the day. This is the unseen heartbeat of the tavern, slow, steady, and essential. You stand near the doorway as the tavern workers unlock the shutters. Morning has settled into something more confident now. The sunlight slips between buildings and lands in uneven patches on the stone road. The hum of the city grows louder, although it is still early enough to feel peaceful. The workers straighten their tunics, adjust their aprons, and prepare themselves mentally for the subtle chaos that comes with the first customers. The earliest customers always share certain traits. They come in quietly, without the flair that later crowds might bring. They step inside with the cautious hope that the stew is warm, the bread is fresh, and the wine has not turned sour. You watch a pair of traders enter first. Their sandals carry dust from the road, and their faces carry the light fatigue of people who have already done too much before breakfast. They sit at a table out of habit, not preference. The workers greet them with nods rather than words. Words take energy, and both sides prefer to conserve it for the busier hours ahead. The traders tap the table gently to signal that they are ready for wine. The worker brings 2 clay cups, fills them with steady hands, and places them in front of the men. The traders do not thank them, and the worker does not expect it. This is a routine built on familiarity more than courtesy. You walk past them slowly, observing the details. The traders check the color of the wine. They swirl it slightly, not to appear refined, but to judge whether it feels watered to the correct strength. They seem satisfied. You see their shoulders relax, a small victory for the tavern staff, although they will never celebrate it. A few moments later, a laborer enters. His clothing shows the marks of early morning work, dust on the knees, dirt on the forearms, hair still flattened from sleep. He asks for stew with a gesture that anyone could recognize. The worker ladles a bowl with practiced care, making sure to give a fair portion of vegetables and meat. The laborer sits near the window, not for the view, but for the slight breeze that sometimes sneaks inside. He eats slowly, as if trying to convince himself that the day will not be as hard as yesterday. You notice how all of them, traders and laborers alike, drink with a quiet respect for the moment. Tavern mornings offer a small pause in lives full of tasks. Even the simplest bowl of stew feels like a temporary shelter from the demands that wait outside. The workers move around them with the ease of people who know how to anticipate needs. They refill cups before anyone raises a hand. They clear crumbs while customers focus on their food. You watch how they study each person's posture. A slight lean suggests someone wants more bread. A shift of the eyes toward the hearth suggests someone wishes for warmth. The workers respond without hesitation. It is almost a language of its own, one built on observant habits. A traveller enters next, another traveller besides yourself, that is. Their clothes speak of distance and dust. They look around the tavern with curiosity rather than familiarity. You identify with this. The traveller approaches the counter and points toward the olives and cheese. The worker gathers a simple plate and sets it out with quiet efficiency. The traveller sits alone, grateful for a space that does not demand conversation. You see the trainee approach with a jug of watered wine. Their movements still hold a slight stiffness, but they keep their balance well enough. The older worker watches from the corner, ready to intervene, but choosing not to unless necessary. The trainee pours a cup for the traveller. It lands at the correct ratio, and the trainee steps back with a small hint of pride. You feel it too, even from your detached point of view. As the morning progresses, the tavern begins to sound more alive. Chairs scrape gently against the floor. People shift in their seats. Coins clink softly as traders settle their tabs. No noise is loud or disruptive. Everything resembles the gentle sounds of a city stretching its limbs after sleep. The workers continue their tasks. One sweeps crumbs from the floor, another checks the stew, another wipes cups that have just been washed. Their movements remain calm, never rushed, even when customers enter in small clusters. You realize that the first customers set the tone for the rest of the day. If the morning remains steady, the workers carry that rhythm into the afternoon. It becomes a form of emotional momentum. A pair of couriers enters next. They smell of sweat and speed. They have been carrying messages since dawn and probably received little thanks for it. They drink quickly, barely tasting the wine, then ask for bread with a gesture. The workers provide it without question. Couriers come and go with a purpose, and taverns know better than to disturb their pace. The couriers leave as swiftly as they arrived. The tavern settles again into its softer rhythm. You look around at the room. Sunlight reaches deeper into the space now. The lamps have been extinguished for the moment. The air feels warmer. You sense a collective breath ease out across the room, customers and workers alike. This is the first wave of the day, predictable, steady, a reminder that not all hours must be dramatic. The tavern workers appreciate this early calm because they know it cannot last. As you observe them refill amphorae, wipe tables, and gather empty plates, you understand something simple. Morning customers ease the tavern into its identity. They come to be fed, to rest briefly, and to prepare for whatever waits beyond the door. You watch the workers prepare for the next wave with practiced calm. Their movements show readiness without anxiety. This is the work they know, the work they carry out day after day. Quiet work, reliable work. The morning passes like a long breath, steady and rhythmic as the tavern slips gently toward the busier hours ahead. You feel the change in the tavern before the workers say anything. Morning has passed, and with it goes the calm that everyone pretends will last longer than it ever does. The light in the room shifts to a brighter angle. The warmth of the hearth spreads farther across the floor, and the smell of the stew thickens as it reaches its midday confidence. The workers straighten themselves slightly, as if bracing for a tide they know far too well. The midday rush approaches with the certainty of taxes and worn sandals. The first wave arrives in a loose cluster, made up of labourers on break, a pair of sailors who walked much farther inland than their sense of direction probably intended, and a few clerks who hope no one from their offices notices that they slipped out early. You watch them enter with different levels of energy. Some move quickly, hungry enough to ignore the crowd. Others drift inside with the slow resignation of people who knew they should have packed food, but trusted their morning selves a little too much. The workers act like a practiced orchestra, each person handling a task without waiting to be asked. One moves to the counter, collecting cups and filling them with wine at a steady pace. Another ladles stew into bowls, careful to rotate the pot so the ingredients stay evenly distributed. You notice how their arms move in long, smooth arcs. It is a simple motion, but it carries the weight of countless days spent doing the same thing. You watch the labourers claim a large table, spreading out like men trying to reclaim personal space after hours spent in close quarters. Their presence brings the smell of soil, sweat and sun, and they seem grateful for the shade. The worker assigned to their table moves with a slight quickness, placing bread and olives before they ask. They do not acknowledge the gesture, but you see their eyes soften. Hungry people rarely complain when you feed them. At another table, the sailors examine the room with curiosity. You can tell from their posture that they are used to rolling decks, so the solid floor feels suspicious to them. They gesture toward the wine, wanting something stronger than they will get, but accepting it anyway. The worker pours for them with a polite neutrality. The sailors drink heartily without occasion. The workers know they will not linger long. Sailors rarely do. The clerks, on the other hand, carry a different kind of hunger. They look tired in a quieter way. Their exhaustion settles behind their eyes rather than in their muscles. One sits near the window trying to catch a bit of sun, while another chooses a corner where no one will ask them to speak. The workers navigate around them with gentle steps, knowing that clerks often crave silence more than food. The noise level inside the tavern rises, but not all at once. It trickles upward like water filling a basin. Chairs scrape across the floor, bowls clatter, wine sloshes, and blades tap cutting boards as workers slice more cheese. You hear coins landing on tables as customers prepare payment early, hoping to slip out before the rush grows larger. You can sense the tension building, not in a dramatic way, but in the way a rope tightens slowly before a heavy load is pulled. The trainee from earlier steps into the crowd with a jug of wine. Their confidence wavers for a moment when the wave of customers thickens around them. You see the older worker watch carefully, ready to intervene if needed. The trainee approaches a group of labourers and pours for them. The pour is steady enough, though the jug wobbles at the end. They catch it before it spills. You feel a small pulse of relief. The tavern accepts the effort and keeps moving. In the kitchen area, another worker slices fruit to add to plates. Figs, apples and grapes fill wooden bowls. The fruit does not last long in this environment. Heat and humidity work against it, but customers like the balance it brings to the heavy stew. You watch the worker arrange the fruit carefully, creating a sense of abundance. Even modest food feels richer when presented neatly. The workers rotate positions when the rush peaks. The stew ladler becomes the cup washer. The bread slicer becomes the floor sweeper. The rotation keeps everyone from burning out too early. You admire the quiet strategy behind it. It shows an understanding of human limits, something taverns learn the hard way over years of long days. The noise continues to rise, not in a chaotic way, but in a steady hum that sits just below the threshold of annoyance. It is the sound of people refueling. The tavern handles it with an impressive calm. No one shouts, no one rushes wildly. Everyone moves with purpose. Even the customers sense that this is a place where frantic energy fades into something manageable. You watch a worker wipe down a table just as new guests approach it. Their timing is exact, almost suspiciously so. They clear crumbs, straighten the bench, replace a cup, and step aside as the next group sits down. It looks effortless, but you know it took many days of learning how to predict patterns. Taverns teach anticipation better than any formal training. The hearth continues to heat the stew, and the aroma fills the room. It blends with the scent of olives, cheese, warm bread, and the faint tang of wine. The mixture feels comforting in a strangely grounding way. You sense why people return to this tavern. The food does not aim for greatness. It aims for consistency, and consistency feels safe. As the rush reaches its height, you see the workers tighten their focus. They move from table to table in a quiet pattern. Pour over here, clear over there, sweep up the crumbs, refill olive bowls, tilt the amphora to check the level, add water to stretch the wine if afternoon supplies look thin. The older worker raises their eyebrows for a moment when they notice the rate of consumption. They adjust the water jug accordingly, keeping the ratio modest. It is a small skill, but an important one. After nearly an hour, the crowd begins to thin. Customers leave in ones and twos, their energy restored. They step back into the sun, ready to face the rest of their afternoon tasks. The workers remain still for a moment, letting the quiet return. They take a collective breath that slips into the air like a prayer for stamina. This is the midday rush. It is always predictable, exerting, and necessary, a moment where the tavern reveals its real purpose, feeding the city before its people forget to take care of themselves. And the workers carry it with the same calm acceptance they bring to every hour of the day. You notice the shift in the tavern long before anything disruptive actually happens. It is always like this. The air tightens. The workers glance toward the door more often. Even the lamps seem to anticipate trouble. The midday calm fades into something slightly sharper. Not dramatic, just a reminder that running a tavern is never as simple as pouring wine and wiping down tables. Unruly customers are not rare in Rome. The city is full of people who work too hard, travel too far, lose too much money, win too much money, or simply wake up on the wrong side of their straw-filled mattress. A tavern is where these feelings gather. Not intentionally, they just slip inside, the way dust slips through cracks in the wall. You prepare yourself the same way the workers prepare themselves, with patience, resignation, and a sense of humor that leans a little dry. The first sign is always posture. Someone enters with shoulders too loose or too tight. Both extremes signal potential trouble. A man arrives now with the looseness that comes from wine he drank somewhere else. His steps feel confident for reasons that do not deserve confidence. He sits heavily on a bench that did nothing to deserve it. The workers watch respectfully but with clear awareness. They know this shape of energy. A pair of gamblers walks in next. They carry a different kind of tension. They move with the stride of men who spent the morning losing coin after coin. They sit at a table and place a small pile of dice in the center. They do not roll them. They simply stare at them as if waiting for the dice to apologize. The workers recognize this mood as well. Gamblers in a reflective phase can swing either toward quiet brooding or toward loud declarations that the gods conspire against them. The workers hope for the former, but prepare for the latter. The tavern remains steady for a few minutes, then the loosened man waves vaguely for wine. The worker pours it without fuss, delivering it with the same calm they use with every customer. The man drinks it too quickly, then squints at the cup, as if the cup offended him. You see the worker tilt their head slightly. A small calculation takes place at that moment. Distance, possible risk, available exits, and nearby objects that could turn into problems. It is the kind of thinking tavern workers learn without being formally taught. The gamblers begin muttering at each other. Their voices rise in uneven bursts. Nothing dramatic yet, just two men trying to convince themselves that misfortune is temporary. They order wine, stew, bread, anything that feels grounding. The worker brings everything promptly. Fast service often prevents arguments from growing louder. The workers know this truth better than anyone. The loosened man stands up and walks in an unsteady line toward the hearth. He studies the stew pot as though he expects it to reveal a great secret. The worker approaches with mild firmness, guiding him back toward his bench with body language alone. You admire how the worker handles it with quiet dignity, no confrontation, just gentle redirection, like coaxing a stubborn goat away from a vegetable cart. For a moment, it seems like the situation will settle, but taverns have a way of testing patience. Another customer enters, carrying the kind of swagger that usually signals a desire for attention. He looks around for a table, but spots the gamblers instead. He laughs in a way that feels performative, the kind of laugh someone uses to poke at a sleeping dog. The gamblers stiffen. You feel the air shift once again. The workers respond immediately. One moves closer to the gamblers. Another stays near the swaggering man. The older worker stands in a central position where they can see everything at once. This is tavern diplomacy. No speeches, no warnings, just quiet proximity used as a stabilizing force. The swaggering man orders wine and bread. He slaps coins onto the counter with too much force. Not enough to break anything, but enough to test boundaries. The worker picks up the coins calmly, checks their edges with a practiced thumb, and serves the man without hesitation. Calm service often diffuses ego. Not always, but often enough to try. The gamblers debate whether the swaggering man's tone was an insult. He did not intend one, but intention matters less than perception when people are tired, hungry, or unlucky. They begin speaking louder. The swaggering man responds with a grin that invites misunderstanding. The loosened man attempts to join the conversation, although no one asks for his opinion. You watch the workers lean forward slightly. The room sits on the edge of imbalance. Then something small happens. A cup tips. Wine spills. The swaggering man steps back quickly, avoiding the splash, and laughs again. Not a cruel laugh, just an unfortunate one. The gamblers take offense. They rise halfway out of their seats. The swaggering man raises his eyebrows. The loosened man tries to interpret the moment and fails. This is the precise moment when the workers intervene, not with force, not with commands, with motion. One places fresh bread on the gambler's table, another hands the swaggering man a cloth for the spill. The older worker lifts the stew ladle and begins serving plates to everyone within reach. Food has a remarkable ability to redirect tension. The workers know this deeply. The gamblers sit back down, not because they feel calm, but because stew appears in front of them. The swaggering man takes the cloth and wipes the table with theatrical exaggeration, but at least it occupies him. The loosened man returns to his corner, distracted by the arrival of more bread. The room exhales. You watch the workers remain near the tables for a few minutes, ensuring the energy settles. Their presence alone acts like a weight on a loose scroll, keeping edges from curling upward. Once the moment passes, they resume their normal rhythm. This is the dance of a Roman tavern. Trouble walks in often. Trouble rarely wins, not because the workers fight it, but because they guide it gently into calmer waters. They redirect, distract, soften, and steady. They treat every person as a potential storm that might choose not to break if given enough warmth, food, and quiet attention. You admire their patience, their strategy, and their quiet authority. None of this is dramatic or heroic work, just steady work that keeps a tavern alive, hour after hour. You walk through the tavern as the rush fades, and you feel the shift into the part of the day the workers never get credit for. Customers see the wine, the food, the benches, and the warmth, but they do not see the layer of constant upkeep that keeps the place from collapsing into grime and chaos. This section of the day looks quiet from a distance. Up close, it demands just as much work as the peak hours. The workers move through the tavern with cloth, buckets, and brooms, turning disorder into something acceptable again. The room always tells the truth. Tables hold crumbs, streaks of stew, and olive pits that escaped earlier attempts at tidiness. Clay cups sit on their sides, waiting to be washed or thrown out if chipped beyond usefulness. Each bench has faint dust from worn sandals. The workers do not complain. They move through the tavern as if they expected every mess long before it happened. One worker begins with the tables. They wipe them in long strokes, clearing crumbs and wine droplets. You notice how they fold the cloth as they work, revealing a cleaner surface each time. This keeps them from smearing the mess around, a technique learned over years of practice. The cloth itself tells stories of past days. Stains have been washed so often they fade into a soft pattern. No one questions. You can almost sense that it holds the memory of every meal served in the tavern. Another worker gathers clay cups and bowls from the tables. They stack them carefully to avoid the dreaded clatter that startles customers who thought they might nap for a few minutes. Clay is forgiving but not indestructible. The worker examines the rims of each cup, checking for cracks that could cut a lip or fracture with the next pour. The damaged ones get set aside. They will either be mended or, more likely, join the growing pile of shards outside that Roman streets never seem to run out of. In the corner, the hearth gets attention next. The fire drops to glowing embers, the stew pot sits half empty, and the soot clings to the stones. The worker pokes the embers gently to break them apart, then sweeps ash to one side. Sweeping ash becomes its own small ceremony. It sticks to everything. It stains everything. The worker wipes their hands on a cloth that has no hope of staying clean. The hearth must look cared for, even if it will be messy again in an hour. Nearby, someone inspects the floor. Floors in Roman taverns catch everything the tables do not. Olive pits hide near the legs of benches. Breadcrumbs settle near the counter. A thin trail of dried stew usually marks the path of someone hurrying during the midday rush. The worker uses a broom with bristles stiff enough to move stubborn debris. They sweep with long, patient motions and collect the mess into a pile near the door. A second worker scoops it into a bucket with a quiet efficiency that shows they have done this thousands of times. Then comes the washing basin. Cups, bowls, ladles and spoons crowd its edges. A worker fills it with fresh water from the fountain outside. The cold water hits their hands like a reminder that comfort is optional in this line of work. They scrub the dishes with steady determination. Each piece receives equal care, not because anyone praises the effort, but because care keeps the tavern running. Clean dishes prevent sickness, and sickness leads to rumours, and rumours lead to empty tables. The workers know this chain better than anyone. Behind the counter another task unfolds. Amphorae get wiped down. The workers polish their surfaces with cloths, not to make them shine, but to remove the sticky residue that builds up around the rims. Wine drips leave rings that attract flies, and flies ruin the atmosphere faster than poor stew. The workers take preventative measures long before customers notice problems. It is a habit born from experience. The lamps receive attention next. Their clay bodies hold soot from the morning flame. Wicks get trimmed, oil levels checked. You watch the worker tilt each lamp slightly to judge how much oil remains. It is a simple tilt, yet full of meaning. Too little oil and the lamp burns out early. Too much and the flame smokes, covering the ceiling in a dark haze. Balance defines tavern work more than anything else. Clean cloths get folded and set aside. Dirty ones go into a basket for washing later, usually by someone who did not volunteer for the job. Cleaning cloths in a tavern live short but important lives. They endure heat, stains, and rough handling. They are not cherished, but they are appreciated. Their existence allows the workers to maintain a sense of order. In another corner, a worker checks the shelves where olives, cheese, and bread are stored. They take inventory with simple gestures. A nod means enough olives for the rest of the day. A frown means the cheese supply might not survive the evening crowd. Bread gets counted silently. If it looks thin, someone will fetch more or stretch what remains by slicing it thinner. No one mentions this aloud. Everyone understands the strategy. You watch the trainee learning a new part of upkeep. They sweep the floor but miss corners. The older worker steps behind them, not correcting verbally but sweeping the missed areas with a quiet presence. The trainee observes and adjusts. This is how tavern knowledge is passed along, not through lectures but through demonstration and repetition. The workers continue until the room settles into a comfortable state of semi-cleanliness. Roman taverns never achieve the gleam of wealthy households. They are not meant to. Clean for a tavern means safe, comfortable and free of obvious hazards. The aesthetic is not perfect, it is maintenance. Once the cleaning ends, the workers stand for a moment, letting the quiet fill the room. It is the break between tasks, the pause that keeps them from tiring too quickly. They look around as if mentally preparing for the next flow of customers. Then they return to their positions, ready for whatever the afternoon brings. This is the hidden labor behind tavern life. Cleaning and upkeep shape the experience more than any recipe or wine mixture. Without this steady work, the tavern would fail long before the workers did. And you feel the truth of it as you take in a room that looks calm only because many hands made it so. You step into the quieter back room of the tavern where the atmosphere changes from bodily labor to mental labor. This is where the owner, or sometimes a trusted manager, handles the parts of the business that customers rarely think about. The tavern may look simple, but behind the scenes it behaves like a living machine, full of gears that need constant turning. You watch the workers shift into a different tempo here. The tasks become less physical but no less demanding. The owner sits at a small wooden table with a wax tablet and stylus. They track expenses with the calm detachment of someone who has come to terms with how money behaves. Coins arrive quickly and leave even faster. Tavern finances are a predictable pattern. Wine costs rise unexpectedly. Bread prices shift with the grain market. Lamp oil eats a steady portion of the budget. The owner glances at the wax tablet with the expression of someone reading weather signs. He is not thrilled. He is not defeated. He is just aware. Nearby, a worker reports which amphorae sit low and which ingredients might run out before evening. This information matters. A tavern that cannot fill an order loses more than profit. It loses reputation, and reputation is the currency that stretches the farthest. The owner listens carefully, takes note of the dwindling cheese supply, and plans a trip to the market or arranges for a delivery. Logistics become the backbone of the tavern's survival. You observe how the workers communicate with the owner. Nothing theatrical, no raised voices, no complaints, just brief, steady exchanges, a broken stool, a cracked cup, a wobbly table leg. These things appear minor, but they carry consequences. A customer falling from a chair creates headaches far beyond the moment. So the owner orders repairs with calm authority. A carpenter friend will stop by. A patch of wood will be added. Another expense added to the wax tablet. Then comes the matter of taxes. Every tavern owner deals with officials who collect fees for the privilege of existing in the city. The owner reviews the expected payments, organizes coins into small stacks, and prepares for the inevitable visit from a city clerk later in the week. Officials are always polite, but never too polite. The workers stay out of this process. They know better than to involve themselves in tax matters. They stand by, ready to carry messages or fetch coins, but they remain quiet observers. The owner also manages relationships with suppliers. Wine merchants, oil sellers, bakers, and olive growers form the tavern's network. Each expects payment on time. Each expects continued business. The owner plans which amphorae to order based on demand and cost. You see them tap the stylus against the wax as they determine how to balance the budget. Buying in bulk saves money, but storing too much wine risks spoilage. This mental juggling happens every day. A worker arrives with updates about a problem customer from earlier. The owner listens calmly. They do not scold the worker or roll their eyes. They simply file the information away, making a mental note of the man who drinks too quickly and leans too heavily toward trouble. The owner knows these customers. They sort them into categories. Some bring profit, some bring entertainment, some bring stress. A wise tavern owner keeps watch over all of them. Another part of management involves overseeing the staff. The owner observes the trainee from a distance. They watch how the trainee holds a jug, how they wipe a table, how they carry themselves. They judge improvement with silent nods. Training new workers takes patience. A tavern requires a staff that understands subtlety. You cannot rush subtlety into existence. It grows slowly, like the steady seasoning of a clay pot. Behind the counter, the owner inspects the coins collected so far. Some look shaved, some feel suspiciously light. Counterfeit coins plague taverns because customers assume busy workers lack the time to check. The owner trains their thumb across the edges, reading the truth through touch alone. The real ones go into the tally. The fake ones get tossed into a clay jar that overflows with past offences. The jar sits like a museum of dishonesty. The workers continue to move through the room, updating inventory, washing cloths, sharpening knives, and preparing the tavern for the evening wave. The owner walks between them occasionally, offering short instructions. The motions feel smooth. Coordination happens almost invisibly. You can tell these people have worked together long enough to develop a shared rhythm. The hearth crackles softly as a worker tests the temperature of the stew. The owner inhales the scent with a thoughtful expression. They approve the flavour without words. A tavern owner trusts their staff but verifies key details. Food represents the tavern's reputation. A weak stew can cause a customer to wander elsewhere next time. A strong stew brings them back, even on difficult days. In a corner, the owner reviews a list of debts owed by certain regulars. Some tabs stretch several weeks. The owner studies this list with a mix of sympathy and reluctance. People struggle. Taverns sometimes extend grace, but grace must have boundaries. Otherwise, generosity becomes self-destruction. The owner considers who must be reminded to settle their balance soon. These decisions come with quiet weight. A worker approaches with a cracked amphora cork. The owner replaces it with a new one, seals it with warm wax, and returns the vessel to its place. Little repairs like this keep the tavern functioning. Every detail matters, even the ones no customer will notice. You feel the complexity of this backstage world. Management looks deceptively simple from the outside, but it involves threads that tie the tavern to the entire neighborhood. Supplies, staff, customers, officials, expenses, repairs, and reputation all weave together. A tavern owner stands at the center of this web, never fully resting, always aware of the next decision waiting to be made. You watch as the owner closes their tablet, sets coins aside for the next order, and steps out into the main room. Their presence shifts the energy slightly. Management is invisible most of the time, but its influence shapes everything. This is the unseen leadership behind the tavern's quiet work. The owner's work is steady and thoughtful, never flashy. His work is essential to every hour that follows. You feel the shift into evening the way the workers feel it, not by watching the sky, but by sensing how the air inside the tavern changes. The warmth from the hearth settles into a heavier glow. Shadows stretch across the floor. The lamps get lit one by one, each flame lifting the dusk a little. The room feels softer now, as if even the walls are preparing for a long evening of steady work. The tavern always relaxes into its nighttime identity with more personality than it has during any other hour. The workers know this phase well. They move through the space with a calm readiness, preparing for the familiar faces who return after a day of labor, negotiation, frustration, or occasional luck. Evening customers do not rush. They drift. They arrive with the slow heaviness of people who completed the tasks that the day demanded and now seek simple comforts. You notice their steps as they enter. They walk in with a mixture of relief and fatigue. The tavern accepts them without judgment. A group of regulars arrives first. They choose a bench that has molded itself to their shape over the years. They sit with the quiet trust of people who know they are in familiar territory. They order by gesture, and the workers respond with equal simplicity. Wine appears, stew appears, bread appears. The exchange feels effortless. You observe how the regulars lean on the table, letting the solid wood take some of the burden from their shoulders. Their faces soften as warmth reaches them. Another customer enters wearing the dust of a long road. You see the weight of travel in their posture. They stand still for a moment, grounding themselves, letting the tavern's dim light settle into their eyes. A worker brings them a bowl of stew, a cup of wine, and a nod of welcome. The traveller sits alone at a corner table, appreciating the silence more than the food. In this space, silence becomes a comfort. The workers know how to provide that comfort without intruding. The trainee comes forward with a renewed sense of confidence. They carry a jug of wine with a steadier hand than earlier in the day. The older worker watches from a distance, ensuring that the trainee maintains balance in a room that becomes more crowded as night deepens. The trainee pours carefully at each table, gauging the right moment to approach and the right moment to step back. You notice the trainee has learned to read posture and eyes. That is the sign of a tavern worker truly adjusting to the job. Stew ladling continues in a slow, even rhythm. The pot has been refreshed again with new herbs and heated thoroughly. Its scent blends with the scent of oil lamps, toasted bread, and the vague mix of perfumes and sweat that cling to people after a long day. The worker at the hearth stirs the pot with a steady hand. Evening stew needs to last, and it needs to comfort. The worker knows this instinctively. The tables fill gradually. Labourers sit beside clerks. Travellers sit near merchants. Every person brings a tiny piece of their day into the tavern, and all those pieces settle into a shared atmosphere. Some customers relax into thoughtful silence. Others lean toward their cups with slow concentration, savouring each sip as if the wine holds an answer they lost earlier. The workers navigate between them with soft steps and trained awareness. The lamps flicker gently, making shadows rise and fall across the walls. You notice how the light smooths out the lines in people's faces. Even the workers look softer in the glow. Evening lighting makes the tavern feel almost tender. It hides imperfections, emphasizes warmth, and encourages calm behavior. Even the unruly customers from earlier would seem less fearsome in this light. Bread baskets get refilled repeatedly. Customers tear pieces from the loaves, soak them in stew, and eat slowly. Bread holds the evening together. It stretches the meal, settles the stomach, and gives hands something to do. The workers monitor the supply, slicing new loaves as needed. The trainee helps now, cutting bread with a cautious precision that earns the faintest approval from the older worker. Wine consumption increases, but not recklessly. Evening customers rarely rush. They drink at a pace shaped by tiredness rather than celebration. You watch the workers maintain the wine ratio carefully. Evening hours require more attention in this area. Too strong, and the room grows loud. Too weak, and customers feel disappointed. The workers hit the middle point with reliable accuracy. A warm stillness settles over the tavern. Conversation remains low and gentle. Chairs scrape occasionally as someone adjusts position. A spoon taps the rim of a bowl. A basket shifts on the table. These small sounds blend with the fire's steady crackle. Together they form the soundtrack of a Roman evening in a place where people seek comfort more than entertainment. Eventually the crowd stabilizes, no new faces arrive, the regulars linger. The traveller finishes their meal slowly, appreciating the sensation of sitting still. The workers maintain their quiet vigil, ensuring the room stays peaceful. This hour gives everyone a small reprieve from the demands of life outside. You sense the tavern reaching the peak of its evening serenity. This is the hour when the workers' skill shines the most. They manage the atmosphere not through spoken rules, but through presence. They move with steadiness. They observe without intruding. They maintain order gently. The tavern breathes through them. This is the evening service of the tavern. It is slow, warm, and predictable in the best possible way. A daily ritual that connects workers and customers in a shared moment of rest And you understand why people return to the tavern at the end of long days. The tavern does not promise excitement, it promises steadiness, and that is enough. You feel the tavern's energy fade gradually, not suddenly. The room does not snap shut, it exhales. The lamps burn lower, the fire thins to the last few glowing embers, and customers drift out in small waves. They leave quietly, as if the calm of the evening has softened their voices. The workers begin the slow ritual of closing, a sequence of tasks that feels as old as the tavern itself. The last regular rises from the familiar bench and leaves without rush. The workers nod to each other, recognizing the moment they all wait for. Evening service has ended. Now begins the part that customers never witness. You stay behind, watching the transformation unfold. One worker gathers bowls and cups from the tables, stacking them in tidy groups to carry to the washing basin. Their movements are unhurried. Closing time does not call for speed, only for thoroughness. Clay dishes collect in the basin again, and the worker fills it with fresh water fetched from the fountain. The water is cold, but no one comments on it. They scrub each cup with slow, circular motions. This cleaning feels different from midday cleaning. It carries a sense of finality. Another worker collects crumbs and olive pits from the tables, sweeping them into their hands. The cloth they use has survived hundreds of days like this. You can see a faint weariness in its threads, yet it continues to serve without complaint. The worker wipes each table until the surfaces look quiet again. That quietness matters. It means the tavern is ready for another morning. The lamps get attention next. The worker trims the wicks until they look like short, tight curls of char. They pour the remaining lamp oil into a jug for safekeeping. Each lamp is extinguished with a slow pinch of the wick. The darkness spreads gently, revealing pockets of moonlight that slip through cracks in the shutters. The hearth requires its own ritual. A worker kneels beside the embers and stirs them lightly until they cool. The stew pot is lifted away, empty or nearly empty. It will be scrubbed in the morning when the fire rises again. The hearthstones get wiped with a rag soaked in water, removing the sticky spots left behind by a day of ladling. The fading heat warms the workers' hands. You sense the comfort they take from it. Bread baskets get emptied. The remaining slices are set aside for tomorrow's staff to sort through. Some bread will soften with a new purpose in stew. Some will be fed to animals. Tossing bread away completely feels almost criminal in Rome. Everything finds a use. Then comes the inspection. The older worker walks through the room slowly, checking benches for splinters, table legs for wobbling, floor tiles for debris, and shelves for proper organization. They examine amphorae, making sure their corks are tight and their placement stable. They tilt a few to check wine levels. They run a hand across the counter to feel if any spots were missed. Their routine does not vary. It repeats itself nightly in the same steady pattern. Coins get counted at a small table in the back. The owner joins in. Stacks of bronze and silver appear, organized into neat towers. The owner checks each coin's weight and edges. Some go into the earnings jar, some go into the counterfeit jar. You sense their lack of surprise at how many end up in the wrong place. Dishonesty in commerce is almost a city sport. The owner records the totals on the wax tablet, smoothing the surface before writing again. Meanwhile, the trainee washes the last batch of dishes. You see them pause occasionally to examine a cup, testing it for cracks. They have learned to judge the clay's fragility by sight and touch. Their movements appear steadier now, more confident. They dry each dish and set it on the shelf. The older worker nods in quiet approval from across the room. Sweeping the floor becomes the final communal task. Each worker takes a section of the room, guiding dust and crumbs toward the door. It feels like a farewell gesture to the day. The workers move with slow strokes, letting the rhythm soothe their tired limbs. You hear the gentle scrape of the broom bristles on stone, steady and predictable. Finally, the workers gather near the front. One closes the shutters and fits the wooden bar across them. Another checks the latch on the side door. The owner extinguishes the last lamp. The room falls into a peaceful dimness, lit only by the faint glow of the embers that have not yet surrendered their warmth. The workers pause, taking a breath together. It is not dramatic. It is not ceremonial. It is simply the collective recognition of another day completed. The tavern stands prepared for tomorrow because many hands cared for it today. That care feels practical, humble, and necessary. They step outside one by one. The cool night air meets them, carrying the soft sounds of the city settling into its own rest. You follow them out, looking back at the tavern as they secure the door. The building looks calm now, like a creature finally at peace after a long day of feeding the neighborhood. This is closing time, quiet, methodical, almost meditative. The tavern rests, and the workers finally allow themselves to rest as well. You understand now why this work, though simple on the surface, holds a certain dignity. It keeps the city's pulse steady. It offers people warmth, food, and space to breathe. And in the stillness of the evening you feel the deep, ancient rhythm of a tavern that has served countless travelers long before you ever walked through its door. And now, traveler, we leave the tavern workers to their steady routines. The lamps are dim, the hearth has faded to the faintest glow, and the quiet settles over Rome like a blanket someone finally remembered to tuck in. If you drifted off somewhere between the bread slicing and the evening wine pours, that is perfectly fine. These archives are built for that, and if you somehow stayed awake until the very end, you have the stamina of a clay cup that refuses to crack. If you want to return for more slow, calming journeys into everyday history, you can like the video, subscribe, and tap the bell. It helps the archives stay within easy reach whenever you need a gentle story to unwind your mind. Until next time, may your night be as peaceful as a tavern after closing, and your dreams as steady as the hands that poured the evening wine. Good night, traveller.